My name is Emily Carter, and for 7 years, I lived and breathed the walls of Grayson and Cole Marketing, a mid-sized firm in downtown Chicago that I once thought would be my forever home. When I first joined, I was 24, full of caffeine, ambition, and the kind of naive excitement that makes you think hard work alone will protect you. I started as a project assistant, organizing spreadsheets and booking client meetings, eager to prove that I was worth every late night and skipped lunch. I remember walking into that glass building on my first day, clutching my tote bag, heart pounding with nerves. The city buzzed outside, taxis honking, people rushing, but I felt like I was walking into my future. Over the years, I worked my way up to project coordinator, managing campaigns for clients who spent more on one ad than I made in a month. My team joked that I was the office engine, the one who kept things running when deadlines turned chaotic. I was proud of that. I believed loyalty meant something. I gave the company everything. Late nights became normal. My inbox followed me home. I'd answer emails at midnight and join early morning calls before the sun came up. I missed birthdays, skipped vacations, even left my best friend's wedding rehearsal early because a client demanded a last-minute revision on a pitch deck. But I never complained. I told myself it would all be worth it, that someday someone would notice. And people did, or so I thought. My supervisor often praised my dedication in team meetings. "Emily's the one person I trust to deliver," he'd say. Those small words of recognition meant everything to me. They were fuel, the reason I kept pushing through exhaustion and burnout. But here's the thing about corporate life. Loyalty only matters until it becomes inconvenient. It was an ordinary Thursday morning in March when everything changed. The office smelled faintly of burnt coffee and printer ink. Familiar, comforting. I was reviewing campaign metrics when an email from HR manager Rebecca Myers popped up in my inbox. "Hey Emily, can you drop by my office around 11? Just a quick chat." I didn't think much of it. Rebecca was friendly, the kind who always wore pastel blouses and offered little bowls of mints on her desk. Maybe it was about the upcoming intern orientation or new compliance paperwork. When I walked into her office, she greeted me with that polite, practiced smile that somehow managed to feel both kind and distant. "Emily, please have a seat," she said. Something in her tone made my stomach tighten. I sat down, folding my hands to hide the sudden tremor in them. She took a deep breath. "This isn't easy for me," she began, "but the company is going through a restructuring. Your position has been eliminated." That word, eliminated, echoed in my mind like a bad dream. I blinked, unsure I'd heard correctly. "Wait, what do you mean eliminated? I just led 2 major campaigns this quarter. We hit record engagement rates." Rebecca's eyes softened, but her expression stayed professional. "It's not about performance, Emily. You've been incredible, but we're consolidating teams and shifting resources. Your role, unfortunately, doesn't fit into the new structure." I felt my throat tighten. "So, I'm being let go?" She nodded slightly. "Effective immediately. You'll receive 2 weeks severance and health coverage through the end of the month." I don't know how long I sat there. My mind went blank. It was as if all the noise of the world, the typing outside, the hum of the AC, faded into a dull ringing. I finally managed to whisper, "Will I at least be eligible for unemployment benefits?" Her answer came quick, almost rehearsed. "Unfortunately, no. Based on your employment classification, you don't qualify." It felt like a slap. "I don't qualify?" I repeated. "I've been a full-time employee for years. How can I not qualify?" Rebecca sighed, glancing down at her papers instead of at me. "It has to do with how your overtime and contract status were structured. I understand this is hard, Emily." No, she didn't understand. No one in that office could possibly understand what it felt like to give everything, and be discarded, like a line item in a spreadsheet. When I walked out of her office, the world looked different. My colleagues avoided eye contact, pretending to be busy. The whispers stopped when I passed by. My computer access was already disabled. HR efficiency at its finest. I remember packing my things in silence. My coffee mug that said, "Make it happen." The little cactus that survived every season on my desk. The framed photo of my niece with her gap-toothed smile. Each item felt like a piece of me being peeled away. When I reached the elevator, I hesitated. I turned around to look at the office one last time. The place I had spent more waking hours in than my own home.
The glow of computer screens, the hum of machines, the faint chatter of coworkers discussing deadlines. All of it suddenly felt alien. I thought about the time I came in on Christmas Eve to help finish a project because the client changed direction. I thought about the night I stayed until 2 a.m., fixing a corrupted presentation file while my boyfriend waited outside in the car, with dinner gone cold. I thought about how I once told my mom, proudly, "I love my job. They treat me like family. What a joke." Walking out of that building, I felt hollow. The March wind was cold, slicing against my face, but inside I felt nothing, just disbelief. That evening, I sat in my tiny apartment, staring at the severance paperwork spread across my dining table. I couldn't focus. I kept rereading the same lines. Termination due to restructuring. No eligibility for unemployment benefits. I opened my laptop, trying to distract myself. But curiosity got the better of me. I Googled Illinois unemployment requirements. The first line I read made my heart race. Employees terminated without cause, after working a minimum of 12 months, are typically eligible for unemployment compensation. That couldn't be right. I'd worked there 7 years. I had performance bonuses, internal awards, glowing reviews. My classification had always been full-time employee. I double-checked my employment contract, scrolling through the PDF I'd saved years ago. Everything looked clear. No mention of independent contractor, no clause excluding benefits. That's when confusion turned into something else. Anger. Someone had lied. And not just casually. They had gone out of their way to make sure I couldn't claim what I was legally entitled to. But that realization didn't come immediately. That first night, I just sat in silence. I cried, not out of self-pity, but because of the betrayal. Because the company I had treated like a second home had tossed me aside without hesitation, without honesty, without respect. I tried calling Rebecca the next morning for clarification. She didn't answer. I sent an email instead. Her reply came 2 hours later. "Hi, Emily. I understand your concern, but your classification was determined based on internal policies. We wish you the best in your future endeavors. Regards, Rebecca Myers, HR Manager." That was it. No explanation, no apology, no humanity. I sat staring at that email, my hands trembling over the keyboard. For the first time in years, I felt powerless. Everything I believed about fairness and loyalty crumbled. I went for a walk that afternoon through Millennium Park, hoping fresh air would help me think. The city felt different, colder, louder. I passed people rushing to work, talking on phones, laughing with coffee cups in hand. A week ago, that was me. Now, I was just another name on an HR termination list.
But deep down, under the grief and humiliation, something small began to stir. A spark. I didn't know it yet, but that spark would soon turn into a fire, because as much as that company had taken from me, they underestimated one thing: me. I had spent years cleaning up messes, organizing chaos, fixing problems other people created. I was good at finding details others missed. If they thought they could bury the truth under paperwork and policies, they had no idea who they were dealing with. That night, as I sat in my apartment surrounded by cardboard boxes of office memories, I made myself a quiet promise. I didn't know how or when, but I would find out the truth. I would understand what they did and why they thought they could get away with it. Because maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of my story. Maybe it was the beginning of something they never saw coming either. For the first few days, after being laid off, I couldn't think straight. It felt like my brain had been wrapped in fog. I kept replaying the conversation with Rebecca over and over. Her carefully chosen words, that emotionless HR tone. The way she'd said, "You're not eligible for unemployment benefits," as if it was just another line from a script. I didn't even feel angry at first, just numb. Instead, I blamed myself. Maybe I'd missed something in my contract. Maybe there was a clause I hadn't understood, or some fine print I'd skimmed past years ago. After all, I'd signed that pile of papers so quickly when I first got promoted, trusting that the company would always play fair. That was my first mistake. Believing fairness was automatic. I remember sitting on my couch one night, surrounded by half-open boxes of my old office things, still trying to convince myself that there must have been a misunderstanding. The city lights glowed through my apartment window, flickering against the walls, but I barely noticed. I just sat there, laptop open, reading line after line of Illinois labor law, desperate to find what I'd done wrong. Hours passed. Coffee went cold. My cat, Luna, curled up beside me, as if she knew something was wrong. And then, there it was. One simple sentence on the state's unemployment website. Any employee terminated without cause after 12 months of continuous employment is eligible for unemployment benefits. I froze. My pulse quickened. I read it again, then again. 7 years. I'd worked there for 7 years. Not a single disciplinary warning. Not a single cause for termination. I wasn't mistaken. They were lying. I remember leaning back in my chair, staring at the screen as it hit me hard. The company hadn't just made a mistake. They had intentionally changed something to make me ineligible. Maybe my classification, maybe my contract records, but it was deliberate. The fog that had clouded my mind for days began to lift, and in its place came something sharper, something burning. Anger, real, gut-deep, shaking anger. The kind that starts quietly, then grows louder, the more you think about what's been done to you. I thought about every unpaid overtime hour I'd worked, the ones I never reported, because I didn't want to cause issues. I thought about the late-night conference calls, where my voice was the only one on the line. The weekends I'd spent rewriting reports while my friends were out living their lives. And now, after everything, they were trying to erase me, to rewrite my story as if I'd never existed. That realization hit like a storm. I stood up and started pacing my apartment. My heart pounded. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from rage. I'd spent years believing that loyalty and hard work would protect me, that integrity mattered. But in that moment, I understood something brutal about the corporate world. You're valuable only until you're not convenient anymore. I sat back down and opened my old work laptop, the one they hadn't collected yet, because IT didn't schedule a pickup. It was almost poetic. They'd underestimated me again. I logged in, half expecting to see everything wiped, but my access still worked. My email archives, project files, timesheets, all still there. I opened folders, scanning through old documents, and slowly, the puzzle started to piece itself together. In one folder, labeled Employee Classification, I found a version of my contract dated just 2 months before my termination, but it wasn't the version I'd signed. The job title was the same, Project Coordinator, but the category had changed. It now read, Contract Role. My heart sank. They had edited my employment type after the fact. Someone in HR had deliberately altered the records, maybe to make it look like I wasn't a full-time employee. My earlier contract, the one I'd saved on my personal drive years ago, clearly showed otherwise. I stared at both versions side by side, the old and the new, feeling a mix of disbelief and fury twist inside me. All those smiles, those "we're like family" speeches during team meetings. Lies. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was deception. I remember whispering out loud, to no one in particular, "You tried to erase me." And that's when something shifted inside me. The tears stopped. The shaking stopped. What replaced them was focus. Cold, steady focus. I started backing everything up. Every email, every timesheet, every project report. I transferred copies to an external drive, then uploaded them to cloud storage. I even saved Slack messages where managers had thanked me for putting in extra hours. The deeper I dug, the more I found. Deleted time logs for interns, edited payroll records, memos about budget adjustments that suspiciously lined up with unpaid overtime periods. It was all there, hidden in plain sight. And the irony? I was the one who had once organized these files. I knew the system better than anyone else. I knew where to look. By midnight, I had hundreds of documents saved. Evidence, really. Proof that what happened wasn't just business restructuring. It was manipulation. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't even try. Instead, I sat by the window, watching the city outside. The glow of streetlights, the occasional siren in the distance, the wind howling between buildings. For the first time since losing my job, I felt something powerful. Control. They thought I'd walk away quietly. They thought they could change a few documents, throw around some HR jargon, and I'd disappear. But they forgot one thing. I wasn't the kind of person who gave up easily. I'd built campaigns from nothing. I'd fixed disasters hours before client meetings. I'd survived pressure most people couldn't handle. This was just another challenge, and I wasn't going to let them win. The anger was no longer wild. It became something sharp, something I could use. I decided right there. I would fight this, not out of revenge, but out of principle. Because what they did wasn't just wrong. It was unethical, maybe even illegal. I opened a new folder on my desktop and named it Truth. Inside, I started organizing every piece of evidence, labeling each file carefully. Emails, contracts, screenshots, notes. Each click of the mouse felt like reclaiming a piece of my dignity. When the sun finally rose, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold, I sat there with tired eyes, but a strange sense of clarity. I wasn't broken anymore. I was awake. The confusion that had clouded my mind was gone. In its place was determination and a quiet, simmering anger that wouldn't fade until I made things right. For years, I'd believed that silence and patience were signs of professionalism, but now I understood. Sometimes silence just makes it easier for people to step on you. That day, I promised myself I would no longer stay silent. And as I looked out at the waking city, I whispered under my breath, "You wanted me to disappear, but you just gave me a reason to fight." The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache, not from lack of sleep, but from the weight of everything I'd discovered. The truth was out there, tangled in emails, hidden in files, buried under digital layers of deceit. As the coffee brewed, I stared at the mug in my hands. The same one I'd taken from the office, the one that said, "Make it happen." I used to think it was motivational. Now it felt like a cruel joke. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and stared at the folder I'd named Truth. Inside were the hundreds of files I'd saved. Every email, every contract, every shred of proof that something about my termination was wrong. It was time to dig deeper. I started with the payroll logs. For years, I'd helped reconcile project budgets and timesheets. I knew how the system worked, how to track edits, how to view metadata, how to see who changed what and when. And as I scrolled through the records, I found something that made my stomach twist. 2 weeks before I was fired, someone from HR had accessed my employee file. I recognized the username, R. Myers, Rebecca, the same Rebecca who had smiled across the desk while telling me I didn't qualify. The access log showed that she'd edited my classification tag from full-time employee, FTE, to contractor, CT. A single click, one change. That's all it took to erase 7 years of loyalty. I sat there frozen, staring at the screen as my hands began to shake. It wasn't a clerical error. It was deliberate. She knew exactly what she was doing. For a moment, I felt dizzy, like the world had tilted under my feet. I had suspected manipulation, but seeing the evidence in front of me was something else. My breath came out shaky, uneven. My pulse thudded in my ears. They didn't just fire me, they rewrote my history. And the more I searched, the worse it got. In the archived email folders, I found a thread labeled Budget Adjustments Q1. My curiosity got the better of me. When I opened it, there it was. Messages between the finance manager and HR. If we reclassify Emily's role under CT status, it reduces our long-term cost liability. She's been doing coordinator-level work, but without a management title. Shouldn't be a problem if we adjust quietly before payroll closes. I felt the air leave my lungs. Quietly, they had planned it, like I was just another cost liability to trim off the books. And Rebecca, she hadn't been following orders blindly. She'd replied to that very email. Understood. I'll take care of it before the next cycle. I leaned back in my chair and covered my mouth, trying to process it all. I could feel my heartbeat in my fingertips. For years, I had believed in those people, laughed with them during coffee breaks, celebrated birthdays in the break room, trusted them like a second family. And yet, behind closed doors, they had discussed me like an expense. Not Emily, the person who stayed late to fix presentations. Not Emily, who helped interns learn project tracking. No, to them, I was a number, a cost liability. It was a strange kind of heartbreak. Not romantic, but just as painful. I spent hours going through more files. The deeper I went, the clearer the picture became. The company had been quietly reclassifying employees for months, especially those with longer tenures. By marking full-time staff as contractors, they avoided paying unemployment, benefits, and long-term insurance obligations. And I had been one of them, one of the easiest targets, because I never questioned authority. By evening, I had collected everything: screenshots, email copies, metadata logs, even timestamps of edits. My folder was no longer just called Truth. It was evidence. But with every new discovery came a new wave of emotion: anger, disbelief, sadness, exhaustion. At one point, I just shut the laptop and sat there, staring out the window. The sun had set. The city lights glimmered, cars honked in the distance, and life went on, as if nothing had changed. But for me, everything had. I thought about calling Rebecca, confronting her, screaming, demanding answers. But what would that do? She'd deny it. She'd deflect. HR people are trained for that, to sound sympathetic while saying nothing. No, I needed to be smarter. This wasn't about emotions anymore. It was about justice. I grabbed a notebook and started writing things down. Dates, names, incidents. The day she called me in. The email thread timestamps. The edited files. Each note was another piece of the puzzle. As I wrote, I realized something. I wasn't just fighting for myself. If they had done this to me, chances were they'd done it to others too. Quietly, without anyone noticing. And that thought fueled me. I remembered an intern, Sophie, who had complained once about not receiving her last paycheck. HR had brushed it off, saying there was a system error. Back then, I defended the company. I told Sophie to be patient, that they'd fix it. Now I wondered if she'd ever been paid at all. The anger inside me hardened into resolve. I wasn't going to let them bury this. Not this time. That night, I barely slept again. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything I'd uncovered. The betrayal hurt. Not just because they'd lied, but because I'd believed in them so blindly. In the darkness, one memory flashed through my mind. The first day I'd joined Grayson and Cole. I'd stood in the lobby, looking up at the shiny company logo, filled with pride and hope. If that younger version of me could see what I knew now, she wouldn't recognize this place. The company I had once loved was gone, and the woman I used to be, the one who always followed the rules, who trusted authority, who believed hard work was enough, she was gone too. By morning, I had made my decision. If they thought they could erase me quietly, they were wrong. I wasn't just going to expose what they'd done. I was going to make sure no one else ever went through it again, because this wasn't just about losing a job anymore. This was personal. The morning after my discovery felt different. I didn't wake up angry this time. I woke up focused. The grief, the confusion, the helplessness, they were still there, lingering somewhere deep inside me. But something stronger had taken their place. A sense of purpose. I had spent days being the victim of their lies. Now, I wanted to become the storyteller of my own justice. As I poured my coffee, I caught my reflection in the kitchen window. Tired eyes, messy hair, but a strange calmness in my face. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel powerless. I knew what I had to do. I opened my laptop again. This time, not to cry over the past, but to build a plan. My folder named Truth was now renamed Justice. Every screenshot, every email, every log file, I organized them into subfolders. HR files, payroll edits, reclassification emails, internal memos. I even color-coded them, labeling what I could use as direct proof versus supporting evidence. It was meticulous. It was exhausting, but it was necessary. Because I wasn't just fighting a company. I was fighting a system that thought people like me, quiet, loyal, trusting, would never fight back. I knew I couldn't do this alone. So I started searching online for legal advice, whistleblower protections, employment reclassification cases in the U.S. The more I read, the clearer it became. What they had done wasn't just unethical, it was illegal. I reached out anonymously to an employment rights forum, explaining my situation under a fake name. Within an hour, someone replied. An attorney named Michael. His message was simple. If your classification was changed to avoid benefits or unemployment insurance, that's a violation of federal labor law. Do not delete or alter any evidence. Keep everything. My hands trembled as I read it. It was real. I wasn't imagining things. What they did was wrong, not just morally, but legally. That night, I sat in my car outside the office building. I hadn't planned to come there. Maybe I was just drawn to it. The building stood tall, glass reflecting the city lights. It used to symbolize everything I'd worked for. Now it felt cold, almost lifeless. I stared up at the windows where I used to sit. The thought hit me hard. How many people up there still believed they were safe? How many of them were working late, thinking loyalty still mattered? I wanted to warn them, to tell them what really went on behind the HR smiles and motivational posters. But I knew I had to be careful. If I acted impulsively, I could lose everything, including my chance to expose the truth. So I drove home and wrote to Michael again. This time, I told him my real name. The next morning, he called. His voice was calm, but firm. Emily, I've seen this before. Companies sometimes reclassify long-term employees to save money on benefits. It's unethical, but if we can prove intent, it's a strong case. Intent? I repeated. Yes, he said. We need proof that they knowingly changed your classification for financial gain. Not a mistake, not a misunderstanding. A deliberate action. I almost laughed. Oh, I have proof. I told him about the emails, the logs, the metadata. He listened quietly, occasionally asking for details. When I finished, there was silence. Then he said, Emily, you have more than a case. You have a pattern. The word stuck with me. Pattern. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about how many others they had quietly erased the same way. We began working together. I shared copies of my files through encrypted links, avoiding company systems completely. Michael helped me draft a statement for the Department of Labor and the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EEOC. It was terrifying. My hands shook as I hit send. But once I did, I felt a strange peace settle over me. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting. I was acting. A week later, Michael called again. They'll contact the company for records soon. It'll come as a shock. Be prepared. They might reach out to you. He was right. 3 days later, my phone buzzed with a familiar name, Rebecca Myers. I stared at it for a long moment before answering. Emily, she said, her voice measured, almost too calm. We've received notice from the Department of Labor. There seems to be some misunderstanding. Misunderstanding, I repeated, keeping my tone steady. Yes, she continued. It seems there was a technical error with your classification. It's being corrected internally. I almost smiled. You mean the one you changed yourself? There was a pause. A long one. I think we should handle this professionally, she said finally. Perhaps we can arrange a settlement. Quietly. Quietly. The same word they had used before, when they plotted to erase me. I took a breath. No, Rebecca. Not this time. This isn't going away quietly. The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. When I hung up, I didn't feel scared. I felt powerful. It was strange how the same office that once made me feel small now had no hold over me. I had faced the worst they could do, and I was still standing. Over the next few weeks, things began to unfold fast. The Department of Labor opened an investigation. Emails were subpoenaed. Internal documents that had once been buried started to surface. Michael called me one afternoon with a hint of pride in his voice. Emily, they found similar reclassifications for 5 other employees. You might have just uncovered a company-wide scheme. I didn't know whether to cry or laugh. For the first time, my pain had a purpose. That night, as I sat by the window, I realized something. Justice isn't always about revenge or victory. Sometimes, it's about reclaiming your story, refusing to let others rewrite it for you. I looked out at the city, bright, alive, indifferent, and felt a quiet strength rise within me. They had tried to erase me, but in doing so, they gave me something they could never take back. A voice. It's strange how justice moves. Slow, silent, almost invisible at first. Weeks turned into months after that call with Rebecca. For a while, it felt like nothing was happening. The Department of Labor worked quietly, and I tried to live normally again. Though, normal didn't feel like something I remembered anymore. Every day, I checked my email, half expecting updates, half dreading them. I was still unemployed, still unsure of where my life was going. But this time, I wasn't drowning. I was waiting, and I was ready. Then one morning, an email arrived from Michael. The subject line read, "Update on investigation." My heart started racing before I even clicked it. The message was brief but powerful. Emily, the department has confirmed multiple violations of labor law. The company has been fined, and several HR officials, including your former manager, have resigned. Your benefits will be reinstated retroactively. Call me when you can. I just stared at the screen, blinking through tears. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. All the weight I'd been carrying, the sleepless nights, the anxiety, the humiliation, it all started to lift, piece by piece. I called Michael immediately. He picked up on the first ring. "It's over," he said gently. "They settled. You'll receive back pay for unemployment, and your record has been officially corrected. You did it, Emily." I leaned against the wall, pressing my hand to my chest. "So, it's really done?" "It's done," he confirmed. "You stood your ground, and because of that, others will benefit too. The department's requiring them to audit all employee classifications. They'll have to fix what they've been doing for years." For a long time, I didn't say anything. I just let the silence sit there between us, the kind that doesn't need words because it's filled with meaning. After we hung up, I sat by my window again. the same spot where I had once cried, broken and angry. But this time, I smiled. Not because I had won, but because I had survived with my integrity intact. A few weeks later, I received my unemployment check and a formal letter of apology from the company's new HR director. It was carefully worded, of course, polished corporate language that avoided admitting too much. But I could read between the lines. They knew they'd been caught. And the best part? I didn't even need to gloat. Revenge didn't come in the form of seeing them punished. It came in peace. The quiet kind that seeps into your bones when you finally know the truth stood taller than deceit. One afternoon, I met up with an old coworker, Jenna, for coffee. She had stayed at the firm after my layoff. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Emily, you won't believe what's happening," she said, leaning in. "People are talking about you. In a good way. HR's completely changed. They're terrified of another complaint. You made them rethink how they treat people." I laughed softly. "I didn't do it to scare them." "I know," she said, smiling. "But you reminded everyone we don't have to just take it. We can speak up." Her words hit me harder than I expected. Maybe that's what this whole thing had been about. Not revenge, but reminding people that silence is not loyalty. Eventually, I found a new job at a small digital agency on the north side of Chicago. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. My new boss, Tara, ran the place with heart. She believed in flexibility, fair pay, and mutual respect. It felt different from the first day. Lighter, safer. Sometimes, while working late, I'd glance around the office and think about how different this chapter of my life felt. There were no fake smiles, no cold HR meetings, no invisible knives waiting behind polite words, just people doing their best together. A few months later, I got a message on LinkedIn. It was from Rebecca Myers. It was short, just one line. "I hope you're doing well. I've learned a lot from what happened. Thank you." I stared at it for a long time before replying. "I hope so too." That was all. No bitterness, no sarcasm, just honesty. Because maybe, deep down, she had learned something. And maybe I had too. Looking back now, I realized the real victory wasn't in seeing the company fall. It was in seeing myself rise. I used to think loyalty meant silence. That being a good employee meant staying quiet, accepting unfairness with a smile. But I learned that true loyalty isn't to a company. It's to your own values. There were nights when I almost gave up, when fear whispered that maybe I should just move on and forget it all. But some part of me, the part that had worked late, cared deeply, believed in fairness, refused to let them write the ending for me. Now, when I walk past that old office building downtown, I don't feel anger anymore. I feel gratitude, because that was where I lost everything I thought defined me and found everything that actually did. Sometimes, life breaks you just enough to show you what you're made of. I didn't take them down in flames. I didn't make a scene or seek revenge. I simply stood my ground, told the truth, and let the system do what it was meant to do. And in the end, that was enough. Because justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers quietly in the voice of peace that says, "You did the right thing." It's been 3 years since that chapter of my life closed. Sometimes it still feels like a dream, like it happened to someone else entirely. But then I'll hear a certain tone in someone's voice when they talk about their workplace, that quiet exhaustion I once carried, and I remember everything. Back then, I thought that losing my job had broken me, but now I see it differently. It rebuilt me, piece by piece, into someone stronger, someone who finally knew her worth. I'm still in Chicago. The seasons have passed, snow-covered sidewalks, golden autumn leaves, and now another spring, slowly waking the city. I work remotely now, as a project consultant for small creative agencies. My work-life balance is something I protect fiercely. I turn off my laptop at 6 p.m., no exceptions, and I keep that same little cactus from my old desk beside me. Still alive, still growing. Every so often, I get messages from strangers, people who read my story online. After the investigation ended, Michael encouraged me to share my experience anonymously on a professional forum. I was hesitant at first. I didn't want to sound bitter or dramatic. But the moment I hit publish, something amazing happened. Messages started pouring in. Stories from people across the country who'd gone through similar experiences. Layoffs without warning, HR manipulation, benefits denied. So many voices that had been silent for too long. One woman wrote, "Reading your story gave me the courage to speak up. I thought I was alone." That message alone made everything worth it. Last year, I was invited to speak at a small HR ethics conference in Chicago. I almost said no. Public speaking had never been my thing. But then, I remembered how powerless I once felt, sitting in that cold office room, being told I wasn't eligible. So I said yes. I stood on that stage, heart pounding, hands trembling slightly, and told my story. Not as a victim, but as someone who had learned what happens when ordinary people decide not to stay silent. I told them about loyalty, about trust, about how companies often forget that their greatest asset isn't their brand. It's their people. When I finished, there was silence, then applause. Not the loud, performative kind, the quiet, heartfelt kind. Afterward, one HR professional approached me. She looked me in the eye and said, "We need more Emilys in this world, people who remind us what accountability really means." That moment stayed with me. Sometimes I walk by my old office building when I'm downtown. The company's name is different now. They were acquired, just as Michael once predicted. The shiny glass facade still stands, but to me, it feels hollow. I don't feel hate anymore, just distance. The kind that time builds between who you were and who you've become. Because I'm not that woman anymore. The one who let herself believe she had to earn respect by sacrificing her peace. Now, I believe in balance, in fairness, in speaking truth even when it trembles in your throat. People often ask me what justice felt like. I tell them it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like release. It wasn't fireworks or revenge. It was waking up one morning, taking a deep breath, and realizing I didn't feel the weight of their betrayal anymore. It was peace, quiet, steady, and real. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes, strength is getting up one more time after life knocks you down. Sometimes, it's hitting send on that email that terrifies you. Sometimes, it's refusing to let lies rewrite your story. And sometimes, it's just surviving with grace. Every story has a villain, a victim, and a hero. For a long time, I thought I was the victim. Now I know I was always the hero. I just needed time to see it. Whenever I finish a client call these days, I glance at that little cactus by my window. It reminds me that even the smallest things, with enough light and patience, can survive through drought, darkness, and neglect, and still bloom. And maybe that's who I am now. Not broken, not bitter, just growing, quietly, strongly. Because sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't revenge at all. It's peace.